It's a great pleasure for me to be here. I feel very possessive. This is my hometown, and so I'm on familiar territory. When we speak of the narrative of play, we speak of the story of childhood, of the stories children make up to tell themselves and others to establish their identities. Let's say, for example, we wish to study the differences between boys and girls and our attitudes toward both. As I did when I wrote Boys and Girls, Superheroes in the Doll Corner. How can we think about these differences and similarities without large amounts of children's play to examine, since it is in their play that they wonder about themselves, just as we do? Furthermore, we do not learn enough about our subject if we do not attend to its precise dramatic fare, the characters and dialogues developed in the stories. It would be like studying Shakespeare by reading only the storyline without the actual words and actions. What do the subjects say about themselves and about each other? I might be Luke when I grow up, Teddy says in the block corner. You can't be the real Luke, Andrew responds. I know. I mean a different Luke Skywalker, but he looks the same. Oh yeah, Andrew says. That's okay, you could do that. What exactly does this mean? Andrew must ponder as he continues to help Luke build a spaceship. And I, their teacher, have captured a rich piece of conversation between two players on the kindergarten stage. To study young children is to study the theater of early childhood, which of course is the narrative of play. Fine. These are simple enough observations to make. Then what is the problem? And indeed, there are huge problems out there. The subject of the education of small children in preschool and kindergarten is awash with confusion and missed connections. During the 30 years since Boys and Girls was published, I've been asked at times to talk about the issues raised in that book. Its pages are filled with little girl talk and little boy talk, much as are the style and feature pages of the New York Times today. Indeed, on every fashion page, I'm reminded of Boys and Girls, Superheroes in the Doll Corner. No book I've written depends more on the narrative of play to tell its story. And it is only recently that a deep discontent is fully out in the open. Where is the play, is the question. Though many would go further. Where is the kindergarten? Or even, where is childhood? The subject awaits some of our most active soul searching, since it is the play and behavior, school behavior, of boys that takes the biggest hit and receives the most anxious concern. Boys will be boys is no longer permissible as an excuse, and there are people who abound who've never heard the expression, amazing as that seems. Interestingly, my first invitation to speak about Boys and Girls actually came in 1985. The book was written in 1994. 1985, from a group of young men, liberal arts majors at Millsaps College in Jackson, Mississippi. The previously all-female college had recently begun to include men in their student population. And apparently there was a growing desire to discuss more openly What they told me was a definite female-male divide, some of it unexpected. We thought we'd be more alike, and we weren't, both sexes admitted. We read your book because we thought we would better understand who we are now if we remembered ourselves as we were in kindergarten. They said this to me in a handwritten letter with envelope and stamp. This was 1985, remember. In another letter, a young woman wrote, "The doll cornering blocks you describe in the book had the same fantasy talk we had in my kindergarten. It felt very personal." Well, it did not take long in these conversations for childhood memories to emerge of superheroes and princesses and bunny rabbits pouncing on evildoers or going on picnics. But more significant were the number of students who recalled the pain of being excluded from exciting play of others. Why, they wondered, had I not spent more time describing those harsh realities hidden among the fantasy dramas? Well, I must have had similar feelings as I continued to study and write about young children. And in later books, I focused more on the outsiders in the classroom, those left out of the charmed circle of playmates. Play had become the landscape upon which to judge the moral integrity of my classroom. And its language and lore required a faithful rendering. The question was becoming for me not so much what roles boys and girls like to play, but whether every child feels a sense of ownership in the culture we are creating. However, nowhere in books such as The Boy Who Would Be a Helicopter, Molly is 3, Bad Guys Don't Have Birthdays, and of course You Can't Say You Can't Play, nowhere does the lack of playtime enter as an issue. Not until a child's work, published in 2004, does the subject of play deprivation come up in my work. Suddenly, the existence of play itself can no longer be taken for granted. The narrative of play seems to have been interrupted. What does this mean for those of us who claim to study young children in school? Shakespeare does not say, to be or not to be. Oh well, never mind that. Yet we are essentially saying, oh, stop your pretending this and pretending that. We don't do that anymore. And we especially don't want the boys doing it. We don't care much for their subject matter. Of course, the downside is, if we don't care for their subject matter and so show some interest in their thinking, they might not be able to listen to ours. And that's being noticed by a lot of people. All of this came up recently in a student teaching practicum I attended at a local college here in Chicago. I was presenting several anecdotes to support the notion that although the social play of girls and boys may differ in style and script, the basic goals are the same: to create narratives in which friendship and fairness are explored and explained, alongside the use of words to represent action, character, and emotion. Here is the sort of play dialogue I was reproducing for the student teachers, taken down from two boys building a spaceship. Pretend we're Shogun warriors, Andrew says. You have to walk like this. Pretend I'm in trouble. When I go wah, 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 you have to come. Okay? Pretend we're armies, Jonathan counters. Armed armies. Okay, Andrew says. Pretend I'm a robot and I just made you. You were just born. And pretend you can never break. Okay. And pretend we're being bombed, Jonathan says. And pretend you're watching me to see if I'm dead, so you can bring me alive. And pretend I'm armed. Meanwhile, in the doll corner, the girls are developing their story. Baby, come eat. Here's your blankie. I'm in a hurry, Mommy. Don't rush, baby. There's a witch at the door. Ask for a drink. See if it's poison. Pretend it is poison. Mama, don't drink it. Pretend I'm crying. Wah, wah, wah. Okay, come here, little baby. Don't cry. I'll comb you. Pretend you're watching me, and you have to rock me so I don't cry. I could go on forever. I had several more examples ready. Really good ones. But before I could continue, a young woman called out, "Excuse me, but how do we find such stories today? How could you even write boys and girls today? And your other books? Those stories take place during play. And in my kindergarten, there's no time for play. The doll corner's gone. The blocks are on the way out. Recess is cut in half or entirely gone. And indoor free play is down to 15 minutes. She stopped to catch her breath. I could see she was trying to hold back her anger. We're told that little children invent their most interesting ideas during play and really learn how to listen to each other during play. But our children can seldom play an idea out or even decide who is mama or who is a robot and who needs to be saved and comforted. I had no ready answers, but I knew she was right. In today's kindergarten, I wouldn't be able to listen to the narrative of play, as I once found ample time to do. Even so, I tried to insert a more positive note. Well, I hope you'll find ways to include more play when you have your own classroom, I said. You know, when I started out, I was also sidetracked by unwelcome demands. The students would not be so easily satisfied. But your children played, even if you were busy with other things. There was always time for play, wasn't there? The essential point had been made. Whether or not we knew enough to listen to their rich dramatic fare, no one questioned the primacy of play in the lives of young children, in school or at home. And yet, seen from the distance of my more than 40 years in preschool and kindergarten, it was not only the doll corners and block areas and long playtimes that mattered so much, as my changing attitudes toward the characters and plots and words spoken during dramatic play. When did I come to realize that these were stories and philosophical inquiries, and they were going on all around me, and I could learn to use this original research of the children themselves as the liveliest part of the curriculum? It took me many years to take the actual language of play seriously, to see it as the child's own unique exploration of language and thought, the inner monologue reaching out to make sense in a social sphere. And what is play, if not the invention of narrative, of the stories we tell one another, the precursor of narrative research. From the start, from peekaboo, the baby begins imagining the lifelong drama of loss and recovery. Why does peekaboo work instantly? To inform baby of the game Daddy and Mommy are playing. Are they teaching baby his first story? Or has baby already envisioned the scenario, and that is why it makes so much sense? Oh, this warm, smiling person is watching me, is here to comfort me. But wait, now she's gone. Oh, here she is, back again. Loss and gain, back and forth, fear and pleasure, the rhythm of life, its chief narrative. When I go into a preschool classroom to introduce my favorite activity, story dictation and story acting, I might demonstrate the idea with a simple story, such as this. The kitty is all alone. Then it sees a flower. Will you play with me? The kitty and the flower sit together. Don't pull my petals, okay, the flower says. The children act it out as if I took it right out of their own dreams. As with peekaboo, every child sitting around the pretend stage with me understands that I am asking for a story, the sort of story that informs their play, their moments before falling asleep at night. By the time a child is in kindergarten, hundreds of such make-believe narratives will have been played out. The children have barely begun to play on the first day of school when we hear, pretend I'm the princess, but I'm really your mother, but you don't know it because you got lost, and then she was looking for you. The children may not know each other's names yet, but they are ready to step into each other's dreams. The student teachers in the seminar are looking for the stories that will help them study children. Are the characters and plots in danger of being lost? Can such a thing happen? How are they to be found again? These students will have to figure out their own questions and ways of searching for answers. At least that is the way it was for me. Nobody ever told me what to study. My own curiosity and the need to be on to something. Something interesting, pushed me along one path or another. My progress as a kindergarten teacher has been mainly the result of trying to find answers to questions I had never heard posed before. In the beginning, the problems were not deeply philosophical, but more likely logistical. It was greatly to my advantage then to have a morning and an afternoon kindergarten to use for comparison. And there was in those days uninterrupted time to follow through on my ideas and the children's ideas and the student teacher's ideas as well. In my first year as a kindergarten teacher in the public schools in Great Neck, New York, where I had no student teacher or assistant, I realized there were two major hurdles I would have to overcome. One, I did not know the best way to start each day's school day. And two, I could not remember all the children's names. There were 25 children in the morning and afternoon each, and usually at least 5 names in each class I could not remember. Remarkably, I found my answers to both troubling issues in the same place. First, how to begin the school day. Should the children be greeted with a formal task? of the sort workbooks are full of, waiting for them on their desks? Or should we have a group meeting, show and tell, my least favorite? Or should I read them a book, sing some songs, march around the room? What would be the best way to start the day? Actually, to begin a lifetime of schooling. I never took a course in the subject. These were children who, for the most part, had never been to school before. In those distant times, school began for the vast majority of children at age 5 or 6, remember, not age 3, as is the case today. The kindergarten in which I had taught as a student teacher in Manhasset, Long Island, began each day with a class meeting, a useful notion perhaps for older children who had already established firm connections to school and to other children. But it became clear to me that my little ones did not have much to say to one another. Since they had not yet played together, I could see that from their point of view, very little had happened that they could talk about. The children had in common one set of experiences. They had spent the previous 5 years making up little scripts, alone or with others, playing out probable dialogues and plots. Eventually, after years of listening to the narrative of play, I was able to visualize why show and tell does not usually work as a conversation promoter, and why play does. There are vast differences between "I got this truck for my birthday" and "pretend it's your birthday, and pretend I'm a truck, and pretend I give you a baby truck." You could continue this yourselves for another hour. This bit of dialogue was actually one of the first I wrote down, copied into my daily journal. This was long before I saw all these pretends and make-believes turned into stories to act out. Meanwhile, I would need to try out all the other activities, and I was given all the time I needed to do it. But I was beginning to listen more closely to what the children were saying to each other. The children's questions about school could not be answered in a workbook or in show and tell. And we had to start the school day with some of their own questions. Somehow. Will I have a friend? Will someone like me? Will someone play with me? Will they let me be who I want to be? The mother or the baby or Superman or a monster? These had not been answered yet. These were the questions. The sort of information passed along in show and tell could produce jealousy or confusion, but it was of little importance in terms of creating a narrative community. Groups of storytellers who could enter and take part in one another's fantasies and imaginative replays of actual experiences or fleeting images. All the easy group activities, reading a book, singing songs, marching around the room to recorded music, and to my own barely acceptable piano playing, they all needed to be connected to individual children and to a cohesive group. How is this to be done? How does a community of playmates begin to form? And what do they learn from each other? Fortunately, I remember my first teaching experience in a settlement house in New Orleans, the early form of a community center, where the housekeeper came around with her cart of café au lait at 10:30 a.m. and quite authoritatively told the children, ages 3 to 5, "Now you all go and play. Your teachers need to have their coffee. Play good, you hear?" And the children did it. They knew exactly what they were expected to do. The housekeeper, having raised a large family herself, understood something I hadn't learned yet, that children know enough about play to begin a curriculum based on play on their own. Now, being on my own in a New York kindergarten classroom, I had to discover how the children and I could connect these skills to school and to one another. I decided to keep track of connected ideas in connected conversations whenever I could. Connected ideas in connected conversations. It became clear to me that of all the possible ways to begin the school day, if we began with play, the children talked the most to each other and followed through on self-initiated activities. This also gave me a chance to observe individual children and learn their names and their levels of engagement more easily. It turned out that when I wrote in my school diary every day, I could remember that it is Mabel who likes to be Big Sister, and George, who insists on being Batman, and Diane, who urges him to be Robin, because don't you think Robin is nicer? I learned real names by recording the pretend personas. And I learned the most about a child if I watched to see what the others learned about him. Play, of course, came naturally. I could see that. Talking about it needed practice, for the children and for me. How important was it that the children talked about what they spent time doing and thinking? I had no body of knowledge I could refer to about young children having discussions. But I remembered how urgent a matter it seemed when I entered college. And I remembered that when I entered college, I felt like a young child. Yes, certainly, as freshmen, we read Plato's Republic over and over. But it was in the talking about it that our own personal growth depended. Furthermore, it was the talking part that created a connected community out of 25 disparate individuals. My previous schooling in the Chicago Public Schools gave me little experience in these discussion skills. But I could see that the children in my kindergarten were not too different from those of us entering college. In both sense of beginnings, the more opportunities we had to explain ourselves, to connect our own experiences, questions, and stories to the curriculum, the better able we were in college to reason along with Plato, with the teachers and the other students, and maybe about ourselves too, and in kindergarten, with newly found playmates. How do teachers decide to add narrative researcher to their job description? I'll conclude my talk this evening with two sets of such teachers. Actually, one student teacher, Tim, from the practicum I mentioned, and a group of 3 nursery school teachers who told their story together at a teachers' conference in Virginia. I'll save Tim for last. The 3 teachers, Tracy Walker, Mary Thornton, and Laura Ramsey, called their presentation Puppy Play, and they did not consider themselves researchers of any sort. We had a remarkable story to tell, they said, and we wanted other teachers to hear it. That's what they told me when I asked their permission to use their story in an upcoming keynote of mine. for a different conference of teachers. Here's the story. It's about Emma, age 3.5, who was brought to their preschool one day and labeled as autistic. With her have come those who did the labeling, a clinical psychologist and a research fellow in special education from a nearby university. They have come to establish a trial curriculum for Emma, and they bring charts and scripts for the teacher's consideration and for their own study. The teachers are ready to comply, but it turns out to be quite a different narrative. For her part, Emma ignores everyone. She spends the first morning staring at her reflection in a shiny spoon. She has been doing this at home too, and she refuses to be separated from her spoon. By the second morning, several children have begun to call her the spoon girl, not unkindly, but with curiosity and wonder, much as I sometimes think of Jason in a long-ago class of mine as the helicopter boy, since his preferred role was that of a helicopter in sound and image. So Emma is the spoon girl. Meanwhile, as the grown-ups make plans for a therapeutic counter-offensive to the spoon, several children have begun a puppy drama. It starts in simple fashion, with one puppy on all fours, barking and running about, and two owners bringing food and rubbing the puppy's neck and back. With each new playtime, the story expands. This is a child care center where free play is encouraged and lasts long enough for children to develop their characters and plots over time. A puppy house is built of large hollow blocks. Dog bones are fashioned from Legos when the puppy is hungry. And a cell phone is made from Tinker Toys because the puppy is suddenly sick and the doctor needs to be called. It is a full-scale curriculum of the children's own doing, ranging from quiet to noisy as the plot requires. The teachers call it puppy play, but it is all-out practice in friendship, fantasy, and fairness. Anyone who wishes to join the play is welcomed and adds to the plot and characters, or simply follows the plan created by others. It is the third day of Emma's visit. Emma is still looking at her spoon, but she has moved closer to the puppy play. A leash has entered the scene, and with it come a list of rules. The children are cautioned to place the leash under the puppy's arms. Legs, legs, puppies don't have arms, the children tell the teacher. Puppies are not to be pulled, and they must walk slowly. Whatever the rules, the language of puppy play seems to be baby talk, as in woofy woofy and go for a walkie, but the children also say, "Where's your mommy, little pup-pup? Are you lonely? Are you hungry?" Emma begins to watch the puppy play, first in the spoon's reflection, and then she turns to look directly at a barking dog, the one being called affectionately Naughty Pup-Pup. Day 4. Emma goes directly to the leash when she arrives. It is hanging on a hook in the doll corner. She gets down on all fours and stares up at the leash. She doesn't bark, but it is clear she wants to be a puppy, that she is a puppy. A boy named Eddie moves quickly to her side. "Walkie, little pup-pup?" He brings down the leash and gently slips it around Emma's waist. Her mother is amazed that Emma allows herself to be touched. "Say woof woof," Eddie tells her, but there is only the sound of the clicking spoon on the floor as she follows her owner around the room. Final day, day 5. Emma goes directly to Eddie when she arrives. Looks down at her spoon and says, "Woof," to which he responds, "Good girl." She looks at Eddie and barks once more. For the first time, perhaps, Emma is able to see herself in the face and action of another child. And perhaps also for the first time, the 3 teachers feel they have an important story to tell. "We told our director first," they said, "to help justify the amount of time we spend in play. But then with his encouragement, we decided to write down the details of this experience and give a presentation to other teachers." "Did you think of yourselves as researchers?" I asked. "Oh no, definitely not. We are teachers, but we have a good story to tell." I wondered at the time what might bring these teachers further than their self-definition as storytellers. In The Boy on the Beach, I call myself an anecdotist, but some would call me a researcher. The young man from the student teaching seminar I'm about to quote will have to one day decide for himself how to take his storytelling into new pathways, just as these 3 Virginia teachers must. Meanwhile, from the response of his colleagues, I would be curious to follow his career in the classroom. I included this in a new edition of Boys and Girls, and I thought I would just tell you more about Tim. I have a feeling that Tim will be up to something. I was interrupted by a young man across from the table. "Hi, I'm Tim. Can I tell a story I wrote down in the post office?" Now remember, this part of the conversation comes after the people in the seminar have been telling me, "You couldn't even do those books without, as it is now," and they were right, without all that time to observe children playing. And he's sitting there quietly all this time and opens up his notebook. "I was in line yesterday," he says, "behind a boy of about 5 and his sister, maybe 4. Their mother was at a counter filling out forms, and they were keeping her place in line. I wrote down their exact words. I mean, how could you make this stuff up? Girl, I'm telling, Mommy said no explosions in the post office. Boy, okay, I'm being quiet. Girl, you're waking up the baby bird. Boy, huh? Where that baby at? Girl, in this tiny nest. She cups her hands. Boy, oh yeah, that's the tiniest baby in the world. Wow, that baby's going to be famous. Some guy's going to try to steal your baby. Girl, no, my baby's invisible. Boy, don't worry, you got Super Hawk here. I'm king of the tiny hummingbirds. Girl, and I'm Mommy Hummingbird. Boy, hey, I got your baby a nice worm. Uh-oh, here comes the worm stealer. I'm going to explode him. I mean quietly. Tim puts away his notes. At this point I had to move up, he said. But these two were still going at it. Here's what I kept thinking. These little stories must be going on all the time in our classrooms. It's like the stories in Boys and Girls are always there, but they've gone underground. There was a moment of silence, and then a few hands went up from students who had suddenly remembered bits of dialogue overheard during transition times in their kindergarten. There were smiles of recognition as the speakers tried to recreate the mini-dramas. "I should have written this down," someone said, and I jumped in. "Yes, write it down, as Tim and I have done. The exact words, then read it back to the children and see what happens." The stories are certainly there, hovering over everything we say and do. We only need to add scribe and stage director to our job description and remind the boys to explain and remind the boys to explode quietly. Perhaps we can even figure out the way to bring back the doll corner and blocks and give our young acting companies the proper setting for their imaginative play. I guess what I'm saying is that the story is not done. It's Act 2. Act 1 had the glories of play. They're waiting for us to take advantage of what we could learn. And we didn't do our job too well of taking advantage of what we could learn, of making this into such an important part of the program that no one would even think of giving it up. Act 2, everyone is discouraged. We want to bring the play back. How do we do it? Act 3 has not been written yet. The point is, it's out there to be done. We know that the play can be found somewhere. It's not something someone can tell you how and what to look for. You have to figure it out yourself, just like the children use play to figure things out for themselves. And you will find it because it's all around once you get into the classroom with children. You will find a way. I can tell you this because I'm no longer in a classroom with children. And it's very difficult without the children all around to give forth the secrets as to how you open again the floodgates of play. Thank you very much.